And so then I leave. The first thing I do is I go look up this drug. And the first studies I come across is actually 2 news reports of guys dying taking Ibogaine. And the
Yeah.
doctors supervising them were the doctors who took me to lunch. And I'm like, well, that's
Oh,
not a ringing endorsement there. I'm not super cool with that.
let's shift gears to psychedelics, because I heard you
Okay.
talk about this, in some of the previous podcasts,
Yeah.
and I have fond memories of using psychedelics back in my younger years,
Oh, really?
and but those were like in the context of enjoyment, and of
Yeah.
course now it's a little bit more commonly accepted to use them for PTSD or for relationship problems or even for neurogenesis.
Yeah.
So like in what kind of context would you like advise them or recommend them to maybe some of your patients?
Yeah. So it's, if you don't mind, I'll tell a little backstory of how we
Yeah, of
got
course.
in, how
Yeah.
we got into this. Um, so the whole reason I even knew that these worked with PTSD or brain trauma or whatever you want to call it. So I had I had a SEAL client, a SEAL patient when I was still at the SEAL teams as a doctor, uh, and he was really dark and he was really angry. He was getting med boarded out, which means they're forcing him out for saying he was medically disqualified. Like the
Hmm.
reason people aren't honest with their doctor, right? That I was telling you
Right.
earlier. So they're forcing him out, and he's super angry about it. And he's really big guy. Like I'm 260. He's like 295,
Oh
300,
wow.
6'5", big man.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if anybody's going to come murder suicide in my office, this is the guy, right? Like he's
Mm.
just dark, like, look like his eyes are black and just like really
Right.
angry and pissed off every day. And he'd come in my office and he'd vent every day.
Oh
And
shit.
I'm just like, oh man, hopefully it's not today. Hopefully it's not today. And so it took about 6 months for him to get out of the military. And I did what I could to help him.
Hmm.
I got him, like I did some hyperbarics with him. I did some hormone stuff on him. And like, I was trying to help him. It wasn't helping him a whole lot.
Hmm.
But then, he had already been in the military's care for, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years or something like that. Seen all the psychologists, psychiatrists who on
Hmm.
every medication, all the way up to antipsychotics and like
Oh wow.
drugs to
Yeah.
help him sleep and stimulants to keep him awake. And he was on 17 different medications. And he got out and he just said, I'm not going to die this way. I'm not going to die on these
Hmm.
medications. And so he threw all, like, he literally, like in the movies, flushed all of his medications down the toilet.
Oh, cold turkey from one day to the next, huh?
And he got on a plane and he flew down to Peru. And
Ah.
he lived in the Amazon with a shaman
Uh-huh.
for reasons I still don't understand, nude, but
Yeah.
lived in the jungle for 30 days doing Kundalini yoga, like 6 to 8 hours a day. And then he did ayahuasca every third night.
Wow.
And then he comes back to the States and I run into him 6 months since I've seen him last. And he's sitting across this table from me and we're talking, and I have no idea who he is, which isn't, completely out of line because like I'm the doctor for 3,000 guys. So it's
Yeah.
common that it takes me a few minutes to figure out who some people are. But I talked to him for like 25 minutes and I can't figure out who he is. And this dude, like, keep in mind what I told you earlier, he's probably spent 100 hours in my office. Like I've seen this guy multiple hours every day
Yeah.
for 6 months, right? So I have hundreds of hours of talking to this guy and I can't figure out who he is. And he keeps talking. And I'm like, oh my God. He's like, who did you think I was? I was like, I don't know. I still don't believe you're that guy. Like, I had no idea. And everything about him was different. And so I asked him,
Mm.
what is that? Right. And so he told me, and I was like, okay. I just thought that was some
Do you
BS,
have to be naked?
yeah. Do you have to be naked? Like, is that, yeah.
Yeah.
But everything else sounds great. So I always thought, there's just some hippy dippy crap, just ways to get high and call it medicine instead of like doing
Mm.
other drugs or whatever. I didn't put much stock into it until that. And I was like, okay, maybe there's something there. And then coincidentally,
Mm.
a few months later, a couple of doctors from Mexico asked me out to lunch and they tell me about the psychedelic compound Ibogaine. And they have a clinic down
All
in
right. Yeah.
Mexico
Hmm.
called Crossroads. And it's super, super successful for opiate addiction.
Yeah.
And so they're telling me this, like, hey, if you have any guys who have opiate addictions, we can. And I said, well, I don't, like, yeah, I'm not even allowed to prescribe opiates to these guys. Like, our guys are disqualified if they're on opiates, so we don't do it. Like, maybe post-surgical, their surgeon will give them 5 days worth or something, but like, we don't prescribe them. So we don't have that problem. And so it looked like it was going to be a wash. And then at the end of lunch, they're like, well, it also seems to help with PTSD. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm interested. Let's talk about that. And so then I leave. The first thing I do is I go look up this drug. And the first studies I come across is actually 2 news reports of guys dying taking Ibogaine. And the doctors supervising them were the doctors who took me to lunch. And I'm like, well, that's not a ringing endorsement there. I'm not super cool with that. And then again, coincidentally, like 6 weeks later, I was already out. I was out of the military when those guys took me to lunch, but I'd just been out a few months. And then about 6 weeks later, my best friend from the SEAL teams, a guy he was my roommate all through SEAL training. I've known him since I was 18 years old. And his wife calls me and says, like, he's suicidal. He's locked us out of the house. Da, 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 da. So I was like, okay. So I go over there and I'm talking to him, and he's not on drugs. He's not drunk. He's completely matter of fact. He's got his 5-page logic of why it's better for him to be dead. And he's reading it dispassionately and saying, here's why, and here's why. And he's like trying to convince me and sell me on the, I was like, yeah, but none of us want you dead. Like, you didn't, you got to put that part in there. think about all of us. Like, we don't want that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he wasn't going to be moved. And I said, well, all right, last ditch effort. There's this thing done in Mexico and it might kill you. But if you're going to kill yourself anyway, maybe this saves you. And so,
yeah. Probably at that point in time, you're probably responsive to something like that. So like this, in this paper, I just met these 2 doctors who killed one of their patients. Yeah. But it might work also, right?
And so I said, what do we have to lose? And so he's like, okay, but he's very private, and he's like, nobody can be there. It's just you and me, blah, blah, blah. And so I call the clinic. I call the doctor. I'm like, hey, so I have to rent out the whole clinic, and there's a 6-bed facility. No. And like, we have to rent out the whole clinic. No one else can come. But the guy who had been down in the Amazon, I was like, I need this guy to come. And he's another SEAL. So like, come on, let him come.
You have your SEAL's buddy there.
Right. And so he's like, he begrudgingly agrees to it. And then we're waiting outside the train station to pick this guy up and take him down to Mexico with us. He's coming down from LA, and we're in San Diego, and then we're going to go down. And my buddy's got his arms crossed. He's mean mugging in the back. He's like, who's this guy again? And I was like, well, he changed his name. He's in Hollywood. I forget his real name. And so he gets in the car, and I was like, hey, what's your real name again? He says, that is my real name. I changed it. I'm like, whatever, asshole. Do you know what I mean? What was your name before? Yeah. And then he says, well, you know why I changed my name, right? And I said, no. He said, it was a contraction of my swim buddy. So his swim buddy is like his buddy through buds, his roommate through buds. So the same as me and the other guy. Like,
all right, yeah.
So he's like, it's a contraction of my swim buddy's name. So his first and last name combined is now my new name. Mm-hmm. Well, he did that because his buddy had died in the war.
Right.
My buddy was with him when he died and repatriated his body. So brought his body back to his family. And so that was mind-boggling, right? Like, of all the SEALs, that for those 2 to be in the car for that, I was like, that's not a coincidence, man. That is amazing. Right. And so then we went down there, and my buddy had been a dark, angry man for years. Like, nobody knew if he had teeth or not, because like, he never smiled, right? And one night of treatment, he got out of bed the next day. He looked like the 18-year-old boy that I'd met, 30 years before that. He's like these big, blue, expressive eyes and smiling, and all his facial expression. His voice was different. Everything about him was different. We get back to my house. My wife is standing on the porch when we get home. My driveway's for like probably 100 meters long. And we get out of the car. She starts crying immediately. She's like, oh my gosh, what happened? You look 15 years younger. He's like, I know, I feel great. And then he got one of his buddies who was struggling as much as he was from the SEAL teams, he got him treated, and we got another one treated, and we got another, and then one of the guys that we got treated, he and his wife started a foundation to raise money for that. And now they're doing research with Stanford.
Okay.
Sure. And it's all on the up and up, and they have legal protection and all this, and and now we have probably 500 or 600 SEALs and former SEALs who've been through the treatment.